Hi, my name is Lisa and I'm a second year PhD student in the Linguistics department here at the University of Manchester. So today I'm going to be discussing two different quantitative methods used to identify new words which are diffusing through an online music community. However, although this is billed as an analysis of music communities, these methods can broadly be applied to the analysis of timestamp data on any subject. Okay, so this topic emerged as part of my PhD research, which uses social network analysis to analyse the innovation and diffusion patterns of new words in online communities. So, more specifically, I'm interested in the roles of the people who actually introduce words into the communities and help to diffuse them. So, are the introducers the people who are central figures in the community? Are they the people who post most often? Are they the people with the best reputations? Or are they perhaps the people who exist more on the periphery of the network? So, those are the broader questions I'm interested in. However, before I can actually explore these questions, I need to actually get a data set. So, I'm using over 1 million posts retrieved from Popheads, which is a Reddit-based community which is very popular and is dedicated primarily to discussing mainstream pop music. So for people not familiar with Reddit, it's essentially a website composed of thousands of different communities or subreddits. So a broad outline of the way these subreddits work is that members submit a discussion topic, so that may be a broad question. So, which relatively new pop girl do you think will have the most longevity? Or it might be submitting a news article, a YouTube video. And then other members of the community post comments in response to the original submission. So this particular thread was posted by a user who was given a copy of the Blondie Parallel Lines vinyl. And then other members of the community responded both to the original post and also to posts made by other members, so comments made by other members. So there's quite a lot going on with the format of Reddit. I'm not going to get too deep into it today because you could spend a whole presentation discussing Reddit, but that's basically what you need to know. Okay, so the community is interested in artists that are popular among young people, so Taylor Swift, Cardi B, Charlie XCX are all musicians that I discuss very frequently. So I thought perhaps this would be a good community to analyse emerging words because it is often young people who are at the centre of linguistic innovation. My dataset of over 1 million posts comprises every available comment and submission post, by which I mean ones that haven't been deleted prior to data collection, made to the community between its inception on the 22nd of August 2015 and the time of data collection at midnight on the 1st of June 2018. So what I have here is essentially the entire available history of the community, and this is consequently a very large data set comprising over 32 million words, of which over 157,000 are unique. So because I'm interested in newer, more innovative words which are emerging and diffusing throughout this community, what I needed to do before I could proceed with anything else related to my research was to distinguish the newer, innovative forms from standard pre-existing words. So the first idea was to explore this data by hand. However, because we are dealing with 32 million words, that's impossible. Second idea was to remove words which already exist in the dictionary. So get a word list of all the unique forms in my corpus, a unique word list of all the forms in a dictionary, and remove words from my corpus that exist in a dictionary. However, soon discovered a problem with that because it could also, if a form existed in a dictionary that also existed in my corpus but had a different meaning in my corpus to the dictionary, then I'd be losing innovative forms. So I'll give you an example of that. The word gagged is a common word in the English language. It's the past tense of the verb to gag, which means either to literally or metaphorically silence someone. And also, it also means to choke or retch. However, in my dataset, the word gagged is used to indicate that someone is pleasantly surprised or shocked. So, for instance, one Popheads member, referring to the singer Kimbra's album cover, writes, "This is pure saturated lush art. I'm gagged at how incredible she looks." While another user, referring to the musician Sam Smith receiving an Oscar for Best Song in 2016, writes that she was seriously gagged when they announced him as the winner. So in order to avoid issues like this, I utilised an adapted version of a method co-developed by my supervisor Andrea Nini for identifying emerging forms in a timestamp corpus. This method is documented in an article entitled Analysing Lexical Emergence in Modern American English Online, which was published in the journal English Language and Linguistics last year. The basic idea behind their method was that they look for words which were rare at the start of a data collection period and which became significantly more frequent over time, with the idea being that words which become more frequent over time are somehow spreading throughout the community and thus may be newer forms. So the first step in order to actually implement this methodology is to calculate the daily relative frequencies for all of the words in the dataset. So I used a script written in the Perl programming language to calculate the daily relative frequencies normalised per 10,000 words for each of the unique words in the dataset. So to break that down a little bit, this is essentially what the output looked like. So we have all of the days in the corpus and along the axes here, and then along the top row are all the words in the corpus. So we can see, for instance, that on the first day of the dataset, the 22nd of August 2015, the word album was not used at all. On the second day of the corpus, it was used 63.52 times per every 10,000 words in the dataset. On the third day of the corpus, this doubled to being used 143.54 times for every 10,000 words in the dataset. So once we had the list of all the daily relative frequencies, I should just say that we used relative frequencies as opposed to just the raw number of occurrences, because using relative frequencies means that it's possible to compare numbers day by day, even though the overall number of words in the corpus changes day by day, if that makes sense. Okay. So once we have the daily relative frequencies, the next step is to determine if the correlation between the frequency of the word and the passage of time is statistically significant. So to do that, the Spearman correlation coefficient test was used to determine the strength of the relationship between the frequency of the word and the passage of time. So just to break that down a bit. As indicated by the name, the Spearman correlation coefficient test measures the significance of a correlation between two variables. So in this case, time and frequency. A key strength of the Spearman test is that while comparable statistical measures such as the Pearson correlation coefficient test measure linear relationships, so such as the one depicted in graph A, where the increases in both variables are relatively stable. Essentially, you can draw a nice diagonal line through linear data. The Spearman test measures non-linear monotonic relationships, such as the one depicted in graph B. That is, the Spearman test determines if one variable increases correlates with an increase in another variable, but these increases do not have to occur in a linear or stable fashion. Therefore, the Spearman test is especially suited to analysing correlations which may be gradual and come in spurts and bursts, such as the gradual nature of lexical emergence patterns. So, high positive Spearman correlation value, that is a value closer to 1, indicates that a word significantly increased in frequency over time. So, for instance, the word cis, which is etymologically a clipping of the word sister, but it's used in the dataset to refer to a friend regardless of gender, has a Spearman rank score of 0.77. And we can see how the word increases from not being used at all in the first 200 days of the data collection to being used significantly more frequently as time goes on. A low positive value indicates that a word did not experience any significant changes in frequency. So this is the plot for the function word these, which has a Spearman score of just 0.19, and we can see how there's very little change in frequency throughout the entire collection period. Meanwhile, a negative value suggests that a word actually decreased in frequency over the lifespan of the community. So, for instance, the first name of the pop singer Carly Rae Jepsen has a Spearman value of minus 0.29. And we can see how near the start of the data collection period, a name was very popular, very frequently mentioned. And as time goes on, it significantly decreases in frequency as the popularity of the musician decreases in frequency. So what is left to do then is sort the words from the highest to the lowest Spearman values, that is from the most significantly increased in frequency words to the ones that have moved very little, and then actually filter out the words which are not new forms. For the purpose of this research, a new or emerging form is defined as a word which is not a proper noun, i.e. the name of an artist, band, album title, because as we have already seen with the example of Carly, the names of people, bands, artists, etc. can actually fluctuate with an increase or decrease in popularity of the named thing. Also, emerging forms must not appear in standard English dictionaries, such as Oxford Dictionaries or Collins, or if they do appear, they must have a significantly different meaning or spelling than the one most frequently observed in the dataset. So this process left me with a list of over 20 words with Spearman values between 0.4 and 0.8, which had increased in frequency over the data collection period. Time constraints prevent me from going through them all now, obviously, but just to give you an idea of the type of words seen in the dataset, we have the word tea, which in this context is synonymous with gossip. As in the quote, I am going to reveal some tea regarding the Popheads album rating system. So as we can see, the word tea started off, it's not actually a perfect increase in correlation. There's some jittery for this one, but generally we can see that there's a clear increase as it goes along in the data. Another emerging word in the dataset is the word bop, which has a Spearman score of 0.63 and refers to an upbeat, great pop song. As in the quote from a user, I honestly think that almost every song on Lady Gaga's album Joanne is a bop. I don't understand why our critics are so harsh on her. And again, we can see it's actually quite a clear linear correlation as the word increases in frequency over the lifespan of the community. Finally, the word GP, an abbreviation of general public, which is used by Pophead members to essentially distinguish their own tastes in music from outsiders. So they distinguish between themselves and the general public. As in the quote, this must have been the result of the GP letting her music flop last year. And again, we can see that with a Spearman score of 0.71, there's an increase in frequency towards the latter end of the dataset. Okay, so what we've seen is this method tells us if a word has increased in frequency over the lifespan of the community. However, these words may not actually be diffusing throughout the community in terms of the number of people who are actually using the word. Theoretically, it could just be one person that's increasingly using the word GP as the community progresses. In which case, the word wouldn't actually be diffusing throughout the community and might not be of interest to my research. Therefore, I adapted the method to calculate the extent to which each word had diffused throughout the community and entered the vocabulary of its members. For each of the emerging forms identified, the cumulative number of new users for each of the words in the dataset per day was calculated. I should note that a user was only counted as a user of a word if they'd used the word at least twice. So this meant that if someone was just quoting another user once that happened to use that word, then they wouldn't actually be counted as someone who'd adapted the word into their own vocabulary. So if we take the example of the word lit, which describes something which is excellent or very good, we can see that on day 323 of the data, which is approximately the first week in July 2006, only 12 community members had used this word at least twice. However, 2 weeks later, on day 336, 17 people had used this word at least twice in the community. So we can see over a 2-week period that this new word is diffused into the vocabulary of another 5 community members. I then used the data such as one on the previous slide to produce graphs which allowed me to visualise both the speed and the extent to which these new words were diffusing into the vocabulary of community members. This process revealed, for instance, that the innovation bop, which as we'd seen on the previous slide refers to a great upbeat pop song, and not only increased in frequency of usage, but it was also the innovation that had diffused most thoroughly throughout the community, having entered the vocabularies of 1,774 community members, which means that over 45% of the regular 3,822 Popheads community members are now using this word. Meanwhile, the abbreviation MV, which is used on the site to refer to music videos, has spread to a more modest 356 users. However, we can see that MV is a relatively recent emergence, and the speed at which it is spreading throughout the community is actually still increasing in frequency, having had a notable spike at around day 750. Therefore, although it's not quite as successful as BOP yet, we can classify this as a word which is still actively diffusing throughout the community. In contrast to these successful diffusions, I found that the word yaff, a variant of yes, despite having significantly increased in frequency over the lifespan of the dataset, was nevertheless only used by 2 community members. And this number is actually so insignificant in terms of the overall number of regular members that it doesn't even show up on a graph. So we can say that this isn't a successful diffusion. It's not diffusing into the vocabulary of community members, even though it's actually becoming significantly more frequent. So to conclude then, today I've presented 2 methods. The first identifies words which have increased significantly in frequency, and you could also modify this method and look at, for instance, the words which have decreased in frequency if your interest was looking in topics, themes that are fading throughout a community. And the second illustrates the speed and the extent to which these new words are diffusing or failing to diffuse into the vocabularies of community members. So future directions for my research will be now to look what's going on behind these numbers. So why are these particular forms emerging and diffusing throughout the community? And also, why have others failed to? Why is it that some words are actually increased in frequency and also being picked up by other members, and some words such as yaff are being practically ignored by the majority of the community? I'm also interested in looking at the community roles of the people leading diffusion processes. So for instance, is the first person who introduces a word into the community also the same type of person, by which I mean do they have a similar community profile in terms of number of posts as the people leading the diffusion and being the early adopters, adapting the word later? Thank you.